Someone told you a story about a woman. You believed it. Then you found out the story was wrong. That feeling, that quiet disorientation when a narrative you trusted turns out to be incomplete, is exactly what this video is about. Because it happened to Mary Magdalene. And it has been happening for about 14 centuries. We are going to look at what the biblical text actually says about her. We are going to separate that from what tradition layered on top of it. And we are going to slow down at the moment that matters most. A garden, early morning, a voice saying her name. Let us start at the beginning of what we know. Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. Jesus is traveling through towns and villages. With him are the 12 disciples. And also, the text says, certain women. Luke names them. Mary Magdalene is listed first. The text says 7 demons had gone out of her. That is the extent of the description. 7 demons cast out. Her name is listed first among the women. Luke also tells us these women were supporting Jesus and the disciples out of their own resources. They were traveling with the group. They were contributing financially and practically to the ministry. That is what the text shows. Notice what is not there. There is no mention of her profession. There is no suggestion of moral failure. There is no romantic or physical detail of any kind. Luke is describing a woman who was healed and who responded to that healing by following, by giving, by staying close. Now here is where we need to pause and address the tradition directly. In the year 591 AD, Pope Gregory I delivered a sermon. In that sermon, he merged 3 different women into one. He identified Mary Magdalene with the unnamed sinful woman in Luke chapter 7 who washed Jesus' feet with her tears. He also connected her with Mary of Bethany, the sister of Lazarus. The Roman Catholic Church officially acknowledged in 1969 that this identification was an error. The Eastern Orthodox tradition had never made the same conflation. Most modern scholars across traditions agree that these are separate individuals, but the damage to Mary Magdalene's reputation had already been done. For over 1,000 years, the image of her as a repentant prostitute spread through paintings, sermons, and literature. The image became more famous than the text. That is how the text gets buried. So who does the text actually show us? A woman who had been healed. A woman who traveled with Jesus. A woman who supported the ministry. A woman who stayed. That last word matters more than it might seem. The gospel accounts of the crucifixion are careful about who was present. Mark chapter 15 tells us that women were there, watching from a distance, and among them was Mary Magdalene. John's gospel places her even closer, near the cross itself. While the disciples had scattered, she stayed. The text does not editorialize about this. It simply records it. She watched where the body was laid. She was among the women who prepared spices to tend to the tomb. She came back, early in the morning, before the sun was fully up. This is where we slow down. John chapter 20, verse 1. Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb while it is still dark. She sees the stone has been moved. She runs to Simon Peter and the other disciple and tells them. They run to the tomb. They look in. They leave. The text says they went back to their homes. Mary stayed. She is standing outside the tomb, weeping. The Greek word used here is not a quiet kind of sorrow. It describes loud, visible grief. She is not composed. She is not performing devotion. She is crying in the dark, outside a borrowed tomb where the body of someone she followed should be. She bends down to look into the tomb. 2 figures in white are sitting where the body had been. They ask her why she is weeping. She says the same thing she said to the disciples. Someone has taken him away, and she does not know where they have put him. Then she turns around. There is a man standing there. She does not recognize him. She assumes he is the gardener. She asks him, "If you have carried him somewhere, tell me where you have put him." She will go and get him herself. Notice that she is not waiting for someone else to act. Even in her grief, she is trying to do something. Then he says her name, Mary. She turns. The word she uses in response is a Hebrew word of address, a word you use for a teacher. The recognition is immediate and complete. She knows his voice when he speaks her name. This is the scene the text gives us. No drama added, no spectacle. A garden, a grieving woman, a name spoken, and the first recognition of the resurrection. Jesus then says something worth pausing on. He tells her not to hold on to him because he has not yet ascended to the Father. And then he gives her a task. Go to my brothers, he says, and tell them. She goes. She tells the disciples. The text records what she says. I have seen the Lord. Mark chapter 16, verse 9 confirms this sequence. The text states that Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene after rising early on the first day of the week. First. The text uses that word, not one of the 12, not Peter who ran to the tomb, not the beloved disciple, Mary Magdalene. In the ancient world, the testimony of a woman was considered legally unreliable in most contexts. First-century Jewish legal traditions did not typically accept women as valid witnesses in court proceedings. The disciples' initial response to the women's report in Luke chapter 24 is described as seeming like nonsense to them. That word in the Greek is a medical term for delirious talk. If the early followers of Jesus were inventing a resurrection account, to convince a skeptical audience, they would not have chosen a woman as the first witness. They certainly would not have listed her by name and made her testimony the hinge point of the story. That is not how ancient persuasion worked. The text is not arguing for her credibility. It is simply recording what happened. She was there. She saw. She told. Scholars sometimes call her the apostle to the apostles. That phrase is not a modern invention. It appears in writings from early church figures like Hippolytus in the 3rd century. The role being described is simple. She brought the news to those who would then carry it outward. She is the first link in a chain that the whole Christian faith depends on. Now here is where we come back to the present moment. If you have ever shared something true, something you genuinely saw or experienced and been dismissed, this story will resonate in a particular way. Mary Magdalene's witness was doubted. Her reputation was later buried under a centuries-long misidentification. But the text kept her name. It kept her location. It kept the moment. The accuracy of the record outlasted the distortion of the tradition. There is something stabilizing in that. Your witness, the thing you actually experienced, is not canceled by someone else's misrepresentation of it. It exists independently of how it is received. Mary's account became the foundation not because everyone believed her immediately, but because it was true and because she said it anyway. If your witness has been doubted, notice that the act of telling it still mattered. The disciples did not believe immediately, but she told them. And later, that report became the core of what they proclaimed. Tell what you have seen. Let the record stand. The response is not entirely yours to control. Let us take a moment to summarize what the text shows us about Mary Magdalene, separated from what tradition added. The text shows a woman healed of 7 demons, part of a group traveling with Jesus, one of the financial supporters of the ministry, present at the crucifixion, present at the burial, the first to arrive at the empty tomb, the first to encounter the risen Jesus, the first to be sent to announce the resurrection. The text does not show any indication of her occupation before following Jesus, any moral failure or sexual history, any romantic relationship with Jesus, any connection to the unnamed sinful woman of Luke 7. Those additions came from a sermon in the 6th century. They are not in the text. This matters for how we read Scripture. When a tradition about a biblical figure is repeated long enough, it can feel more authoritative than the text itself. One discipline this video invites is going back to the passage, reading it carefully, and asking what the text actually says versus what you have heard about it. Those two things are sometimes the same. Sometimes they are not. Mary Magdalene is one of the clearest examples of the gap that can exist between a text and its interpretation. The text gives her a specific name, a specific location, and a specific title. First witness. She was a woman in a world that doubted women's testimony, a healed person in a group of disciples, a follower who stayed when others left, and the first person to carry the most important message in the Christian story. That is who the text shows us. Here is the question I want to leave with you, and I genuinely want to hear your thinking in the comments. When you first learned about Mary Magdalene, what version of her did you receive? Was it the one the text gives, or was it shaped more by tradition? And if it was shaped by tradition, what did it feel like to read the actual passages? That kind of noticing, the moment you realize the text says something different than what you were told, is worth paying attention to. It is part of learning to read carefully. If this kind of exploration helps Scripture feel clearer and closer to what the original text is actually saying, subscribe to Rheincora for calm Bible explainers like this. New videos come out regularly, and each one follows the same approach. We stay close to the text, we move slowly through it, and we try to separate what is written from what has been added over time. The garden scene in John chapter 20 is one of the most quietly remarkable moments in the New Testament. A woman standing in grief, a name spoken, a message given. I hope reading it carefully changes something for you, the way it has for many others who went back to the text expecting to find the familiar story and found something richer instead.